When you first hear this story, it almost sounds fake, like something ripped straight from a rumor account or a bad headline grab. A rapper, a private party, an argument, gunshots, and a San Francisco 49ers player ending the night in surgery. But this is real, and that's why it caught so many people off guard. According to police and multiple reports, 49ers defensive lineman Keion White was shot during a private event in San Francisco following Super Bowl festivities, and one of the names connected to the situation is rapper Lil Baby. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on, because this is exactly the kind of story where details matter and misinformation spreads fast, and we're closing in on 2,000 subscribers with your help. Let's slow this down and walk through what we actually know. The 49ers traded for Keion White earlier in the season to add depth and flexibility along the defensive line. He's not a superstar, but he's exactly the type of rotational piece this team has valued for years. He can play inside, kick outside, use his strength, and give you meaningful snaps when injuries pile up. In a short stretch with San Francisco, he gave them energy up front, showed physicality, and carved out a role that made sense in this defensive scheme. He's also under contract moving forward, which made him a legitimate part of the team's plans, not just a rental. Now to the incident itself. White was hosting a private party at a venue in San Francisco. According to police, Lil Baby and members of his entourage attempted to enter the event and were turned away. What followed, again according to reports, was an argument between White and Lil Baby. At some point, White went upstairs to try to get management involved and de-escalate the situation. That's when shots rang out. White was struck in the ankle, transported to the hospital, and required surgery. His injury is described as non-life-threatening, and he is expected to recover, but for a defensive lineman, an ankle injury caused by a gunshot is not a small thing. This is where the story gets heavier. This is now the second time in a relatively short span that a 49ers player has been shot within San Francisco city limits. That doesn't mean there's some organizational failure or curse, but it does raise uncomfortable questions about off-field risk and awareness. We'll get into that more later, but it's important context as you process this. Right now, no suspect has been named. Police have recovered shell casings at the scene, and witnesses confirm gunfire, but there is no official identification of who pulled the trigger. Reports indicate that White has not been cooperative in naming a shooter, which adds another layer of mystery and tension to an already chaotic situation. That doesn't automatically imply guilt or cover-up, but it does leave a lot unanswered. Before we go deeper, I want to hear from you. When you first saw this headline, did you think it was fake? Just yes or no in the comments. And if you appreciate a breakdown that sticks to facts instead of chasing clicks, hit the like button because it really helps this channel grow. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Lil Baby's reported involvement, what the police report actually says, and why this situation feels so murky compared to a typical incident. There are details here that don't quite line up, and understanding them matters before jumping to conclusions. Once Lil Baby's name entered the conversation, this story took on a completely different life online. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a 49ers defensive lineman getting hurt. It turned into a mix of celebrity, speculation, and people rushing to fill in gaps with assumptions. So let's stay grounded in what's actually been reported, because there's a big difference between confirmed information and internet theories. According to police, Lil Baby and members of his crew attempted to enter Keion White's private event and were denied access. That's where the tension reportedly began. An argument followed, and while White tried to remove himself from the situation and involve management, gunshots were fired shortly after. Here's where things start to get complicated. Police have not named a suspect. There's no public confirmation that Lil Baby himself fired a weapon, and there's no charge or arrest tied to his name at this point. What police did find were two different shell casings, which strongly suggests more than one firearm was present. That detail alone changes how you should think about this situation. It points less toward a single, clear-cut altercation and more toward a volatile environment where multiple people may have been armed. That matters especially when people online try to boil this down to one person versus another. Another major factor here is White's reported lack of cooperation with investigators. According to reports, he has not identified who shot him. That's led to all kinds of speculation, but the reality is much more complicated. In situations involving large entourages, weapons, and public figures, victims sometimes choose silence out of fear, pressure, or self-preservation. That doesn't mean justice won't happen, but it does mean this case could drag on or never fully resolve in the public eye. The police report itself adds to the surreal nature of this story. Officers described the scene as chaotic, with money scattered across the floor and adult entertainers present at the event. That detail doesn't exist to shock you, it exists to explain the environment. This wasn't a quiet dinner or a controlled space. It was a late-night private party with a lot going on, which increases the chances that something spirals out of control quickly. So was this Lil Baby? Was it someone in his crew? Was it someone else entirely? Right now, nobody outside of that room knows for sure, and that's the uncomfortable truth. What we do know is that Keion White was injured, surgery was required, and the 49ers now have to monitor another off-field incident involving one of their players. Let me ask you this, and I want you to be honest in the comments. Do you think the full truth ever comes out in situations like this, especially when celebrities and large crews are involved? And while you're here, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing hard toward 2,000 subscribers, and this off-season is going to be loaded with stories that deserve context instead of noise. Up next, we're going to zoom out and talk about why this incident feels bigger than just one night. This is now part of a pattern the 49ers can't ignore, and it raises questions about player safety, accountability, and what happens when off-field chaos starts creeping into the football conversation. This is where the conversation shifts from one shocking night to a bigger concern the 49ers have to be paying attention to. Because when you step back and look at this objectively, Keion White getting shot isn't an isolated headline anymore. It follows another incident involving a 49ers player being shot in San Francisco, and even if the circumstances are different, the pattern itself is uncomfortable. Earlier, Ricky Pearsall was shot during a robbery attempt, and now White is dealing with a gunshot wound of his own. Two players, two separate situations, same city. That's not something you just brush off. From a football standpoint, the injury itself matters. A gunshot wound too. The ankle isn't the same as a typical sprain or fracture. Even if it's labeled non-life-threatening, the recovery process can be unpredictable. For a defensive lineman, your lower body is everything. Explosion, leverage, balance, and power all start there. White now has to rehab not just the physical damage, but also rebuild trust in that ankle, and that takes time. The 49ers off-season program begins in April, and while there is still a window for him to be ready, there's no guarantee he'll be full go when that starts. This also puts the team in a tricky spot. There's only so much an organization can control once players leave the facility. The 49ers can emphasize education, awareness, and smart decision-making, but they can't follow players everywhere. Still, when situations like this happen more than once, it naturally leads to conversations about whether teams should be doing more to help players understand risk, especially in environments where emotions, alcohol, and large crowds are involved. There's also the roster impact to consider. White was never projected to be a cornerstone piece, but he was a valuable depth option. A player who could rotate, spell starters, and give you flexibility across the defensive line. If his recovery lingers, that's one more position the 49ers may need to address this offseason. And with how thin this team has been up front at times, that's not insignificant. So let me ask you something real simple. Yes or no, should teams be more involved in educating players about off-field risk and decision-making? Even if it feels intrusive, drop your answer in the comments. And if you want honest conversations like this without sugarcoating, make sure you like the video and subscribe. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers, and every single one helps this channel grow. Coming up next, we're putting the chaos aside and getting back to football. Steve Young had some strong words about where this organization stands right now and what he said ties directly into how the 49ers move forward from moments like this. When you strip away the noise from this story and refocus on football, what Steve Young said recently hits a lot harder. Because moments like this remind you how fragile the window really is. Steve Young pointed out that the 49ers are in a transition phase, where the foundation is still strong, but the margin for error is shrinking. The stars are in place, the coaching is proven, and ownership has shown a willingness to spend. What's missing and what will ultimately decide whether this team gets back to the top is hitting on young players who can outperform their rookie contracts. That's where this offseason becomes critical. The 49ers need 5 to 10 players on rookie deals who don't just contribute, but who play above league average. That's how teams like the Seahawks and Rams have stayed competitive while reloading. The Niners have had mixed results in recent drafts. There have been solid contributors, but also too many misses. When you miss in the middle rounds, you're forced to spend elsewhere, and that's how rosters get older, slower, and more expensive. This is why the draft process matters so much right now. Human interaction matters, evaluations matter, scheme fit matters. The 49ers can't afford another offseason where they assume talent will just fall into place. They need to be intentional, aggressive, and smarter than they've been recently. Getting younger, faster, and more explosive on offense has to be a priority, especially with division rivals setting the pace. The foundation is still there, that's the important part. This isn't a rebuild from scratch, it's a recalibration. But recalibrations only work if you're honest about where you've fallen short. Steve Young's message wasn't doom and gloom, it was a warning. The 49ers are built to be in the mix, but to separate themselves, they need another great draft, not just a good one. I want to hear from you on this one. Do you agree with Steve Young's assessment that rookie contract stars are the missing piece right now? Yes or no in the comments. And if you want to stay locked in for everything this offseason brings, make sure you're subscribed and help us hit the 2,000 subscriber goal. Like the video if you appreciate football first analysis, because it tells the algorithm you want more of this.